A man with everything. A wife he underestimated. A mistress who wanted it all. But on the shimmering waters of Miami's Biscayne Bay, one proposal built on a mountain of lies is about to crash against a truth made of glass and steel. He gathered hundreds of people on a lavish yacht to publicly divorce his wife and propose to his new love, pointing to a stunning oceanfront villa as their new home. He thought he was securing his future, a future of passion and power. He was about to find out he wasn't even a guest. He was just a trespasser on his wife's property. Arthur Vance believed the world operated on a simple principle: momentum. He was a man of perpetual forward motion. His firm, Vance Capital, hadn't just weathered market storms, it had harnessed them, turning chaotic energy into brutal, beautiful profit. He lived in a $30 million penthouse in Miami, wore a $200,000 Patek Philippe on his wrist as a simple time teller, and viewed his life as a series of successful acquisitions. His greatest acquisition, and his most frustratingly static asset, was his wife, Eleanora Hayes Vance. To Arthur, Eleanora was a portrait he had bought, admired, and then grown tired of. She was old money, the quiet, unassuming daughter of the reclusive Hayes family. He had married her a decade ago, seeing her as the final piece of his ascension. New money, his, merging with old, respectable blood, hers. But the blood ran cold, in his opinion. She was graceful, yes, elegant, certainly, but she was also quiet, terribly, maddeningly quiet. She spent her days in the corner of their sprawling, minimalist apartment overlooking the Atlantic. Her world seemed to be her laptop, her charity board meetings, and her family correspondence. Arthur saw her as decorative, a placid and predictable creature of habit. He had long since stopped seeing her as a partner or even a person. She was wallpaper, expensive, well-bred wallpaper. This Tuesday morning was no different. Arthur was adjusting his Brioni silk tie, the knot thick and perfect. He was electric, vibrating with a secret energy. This weekend was the culmination of 6 months of planning. "I'll be at the convention center in Orlando until Sunday evening, Eleanora," he said, not looking at her. He was checking his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. Eleanora didn't look up from her laptop. Her fingers, unadorned save for the simple gold band he'd given her. She refused the massive diamond upgrade he'd offered years ago, tapped away at the keyboard. "Orlando. I thought the quarterly review was in New York. They moved it. Last minute." The lie slid off his tongue with the ease of long practice. "I see. Well, travel safely, Arthur." He paused, irritated by her lack of engagement. He wanted her to ask more. He wanted her to be suspicious, to be jealous, to show any sign of life. Her placid acceptance felt like another log on the fire of his resentment. "It's a big weekend. We're restructuring the main fund. It's complex." "I'm sure you'll handle it brilliantly," she murmured. A small, automatic smile. He scoffed, grabbing his briefcase. "Right. Don't wait up." He left. The heavy door clicked shut with the expensive, vacuum-sealed thud of their apartment. Only then did Eleanora Vance stop typing. She closed the laptop, which was not in fact open to a charity website. It was open to a complex asset management portal, tracking the performance of a private trust valued at just over 9 figures. She looked out the window, watching the ocean. She had known about the convention for 3 months. She had known about the yacht he'd chartered, the Odyssey for 2. She had known about the 300-person guest list, the cases of Armand de Brignac champagne, and the absurd, custom-designed canary diamond ring currently sitting in his private safe. And she knew about Serafina. Eleanora stood and walked to her private study, a room Arthur never entered, dismissing it as, where she does her little projects. On the wall was a framed satellite image, a high-resolution print of a very specific property on Star Island. It was a stunning piece of architecture, a fortress of white stone and glass that seemed to float on the turquoise water. Arthur had been obsessed with this villa for a year. He spoke of it constantly, a symbol of the next level of his success. He'd been complaining for months that the owner was an elusive, anonymous trust, and that his brokers couldn't get a meeting. He saw it as the ultimate prize. Eleonora looked at the photograph of the house she had received as a 21st birthday gift from her grandfather. Her fingers traced the outline of the infinity pool. Arthur was right about one thing. It was a big weekend. It was, indeed, complex. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice clear and calm. "He's left the building." "Yes. Please proceed with the final preparations. Everything must be in place by Saturday at sunset." Serafina Rowe lived in a state of breathless anticipation. Her apartment in South Beach was a jewel box of white leather, chrome and mirrored surfaces, all paid for by Arthur. She was everything Eleonora was not: loud, vibrant, emotionally available, and spectacularly ambitious. Where Eleonora was a watercolor, Serafina was a neon sculpture. She was 28, a former brand ambassador who had met Arthur at a party on Fisher Island. She had seen him, a shark in a handmade suit, and had known instantly that he was her ticket out of the orbit of lesser men. Arthur, in turn, had been starving for validation. Eleonora's quiet competence made him feel small. Serafina's wide-eyed adoration made him feel like a god. "He's a genius, you know," Serafina was telling her stylist, who was busy steaming a crimson, floor-length gown. "He's not just a money guy. He sees the future, and he says I'm his muse." The stylist, a man named Antoine, nodded placidly. "Of course, darling. This red is going to be magnificent against the ocean." Serafina's phone buzzed. Arthur. Her heart did a familiar leap. He's on his way. The eagle has left the nest. She smiled. The eagle. It was their silly code name for him. The nest was the cold, sterile penthouse he shared with the Ice Queen. "I can't wait to see you, my king. I'm practically vibrating. Get ready for your new life, Serafina. Everything we talked about. It all starts Saturday." She threw her phone onto the plush bed and shimmied into the red dress. It fit her like a second skin, dramatic and demanding of attention. This was her night. Their night. Arthur had explained the plan in meticulous detail. It wasn't just a party. It was a statement. He was tired of hiding, tired of living a half-life. He was going to gather everyone who mattered in his world, his partners, his rivals, the financial press, on the biggest yacht he could charter. He was going to make a speech, a toast to authenticity and passion. And then he was going to call her up. "He's going to propose, Antoine," she whispered, her reflection in the mirror looking back at her with manic brightness. "He propose?" Antoine paused, steamer in hand. "But darling, isn't he, you know, tethered?" "Tethers can be cut," Serafina said, a sharp edge to her voice. "He's handling that. He said he's ending it. This party. It's our coming out. It's his way of telling the world that I'm the one. Not her." She walked to her vanity, picking up a framed photo. It was a picture Arthur had given her, a glossy architectural rendering of the Star Island villa. "And that," she said, her voice filled with reverence, "is where we're going to live. He's buying it for me. For us. He's been in secret negotiations for months to get it. It's the most expensive property on the market." "My God," Antoine breathed. That's a palace." "It's our palace," Serafina corrected. He said he wants me to be the queen of it. He said Eleonora was never a queen. She was just a placeholder. Serafina truly believed it. She had convinced herself that Arthur's marriage was a prison, a loveless obligation to a frigid woman, and that she was his rescuer. She wasn't a mistress. She was a savior. His lavish gifts weren't transactions. They were tokens of his profound, soul-deep love. The ring, he'd told her, was a secret. He'd had it custom-made. 10 carats, canary yellow, flawless. "A son for my son," he'd whispered to her last week, in this very apartment. She looked at her hand, the one that would soon hold that son. She had won. She had beaten the Hayes family. She had beaten the old money establishment that had always looked down on girls like her. She, Serafina Rowe, a nobody from Jacksonville, was about to become the new Mrs. Vance, mistress of a Miami palace. Arthur's texts were her scripture. His promises were her reality. The party on the Odyssey wasn't just a party. It was her coronation. She sprayed a final cloud of expensive perfume and smiled at her reflection. She was ready. Saturday arrived on a wave of oppressive Miami heat, the air thick with humidity and the smell of low tide. But by 4:15 p.m., a breeze had kicked up, scattering the clouds and washing the sky in a brilliant, preparatory blue. The marina was a forest of white masts and gleaming fiberglass. And then there was the Odyssey. It was less a yacht and more a floating monolith, a 250-foot monument to Arthur's ego, chartered for the weekend at a cost that would make a small nation wince. A red carpet ran down the dock. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi on the aft deck. Waiters in crisp white uniforms offered flutes of Armand de Brignac before guests had even stepped aboard. Arthur Vance stood at the gangway, his element personified. He wore a custom-made linen suit, open-collared, a deep tan setting off his predator's smile. He greeted his guests with hearty handshakes and back slaps. "Richard, good to see you. Glad you could make it. Senator, a pleasure. The bar is open, please. Henry, my man, wait till you see what we have planned." The guest list was a carefully curated collection of power. There were hedge fund rivals, real estate tycoons, a compliant senator, several venture capitalists, and a handful of journalists from financial papers, all lured by the promise of a major announcement. They were the new money crowd, the sharks and the barracudas of South Florida, people who respected only 2 things, wealth and audacity. Arthur was about to show them he had an excess of both. Eleonora was, of course, absent. Arthur had fielded a few token inquiries. "Where's Eleonora tonight, Arthur?" asked Mrs. Henderson, the wife of a banking rival. "Ah, tied up with her charities. You know Eleonora, always saving the world," he'd replied with a dismissive chuckle, which his circle returned. They all knew the score. They saw Eleonora as he did, a relic. At 5 p.m., the lines were cast, and the massive yacht began to move, its engines a low, powerful thrum. It slid out of the marina and into the wide, turquoise expanse of Biscayne Bay. The music shifted from classical to a pulsing, expensive-sounding deep house. The atmosphere was electric. Arthur felt invincible. Every piece was in place. Below deck, in the lavish master suite he'd claimed, Serafina was making her final preparations. She had arrived separately, smuggled aboard hours earlier to maintain the surprise. She was texting him frantically. "Is it time? Are they all there? I'm so nervous, my hands are shaking." Arthur smiled and typed back, "Patience, my love. Greatness takes time. I'll send for you at sunset. Just be ready to change your life." He put his phone away and took a deep breath, scanning his domain. 3 decks of people drinking his champagne, eating his food, all waiting for his next move. He was the director, the star, and the producer of this blockbuster. He signaled to the captain. The yacht continued its slow, deliberate path, heading for the necklace of artificial islands that housed the most expensive real estate on the planet. As the sun began to dip, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple, the Odyssey slowed its engines. It came to a stop, anchoring in the calm water, just a few hundred yards off the shore of Star Island. It was positioned perfectly. To the port side, the main deck offered an unobstructed, breathtaking view of one property in particular, the glass and stone villa, the one Arthur coveted. In the dying light, the house's internal lights had flickered on, illuminating it from within like a spectacular lantern. It was magnificent. "Wow," murmured one of his partners. "Look at that place. I heard the owner is some anonymous trust, hasn't been on the market in 30 years. "Everything has a price, Robert," Arthur said, his voice smooth and confident. He tapped his champagne flute with a knife. The music faded, the chatter died down. 300 pairs of eyes turned to him. He was standing on a small, raised platform, a microphone in his hand. The golden hour light hit him perfectly. This was it. "Friends, partners, colleagues," he began, his voice booming over the state-of-the-art sound system. "Welcome. Thank you for joining me." He raised his glass. "We are here tonight to celebrate the future. We are all people who make things happen. We don't wait for permission. We don't honor traditions just because they're old. We honor passion. We honor truth. We honor authenticity." He paused, letting the words hang in the salty air. This was the part he'd rehearsed. "For the last decade, many of you have known me as one half of a stable partnership, a traditional marriage. But tradition," he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rumble, "can be a cage, a beautiful, gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless, a cold cage." A few people shifted, glancing at each other. This was more than a business announcement. This was drama. "I've come to realize," Arthur continued, "that life is too short to live in a gilded cage. It's too short to live without true, burning passion. It's too short to be with someone who sees life as an obligation and not an adventure." He was eviscerating his wife in public, and he was loving every second of it. "So tonight I'm breaking free. I am ending that chapter of my life. I am choosing adventure. I am choosing passion. I am choosing a partner who inspires me, who challenges me, and who loves me with a fire that matches my own." He signaled to his assistant, "And I'd like to bring her out here, right now." The crowd parted. Serafina emerged. The red dress was a slash of color against the twilight. She was stunning, her smile bright and tearful. She walked to him, taking his offered hand. The crowd erupted in a mixture of applause and shocked whispers. Arthur turned to her, his back to the villa, his face to his audience. "This is Serafina Rowe. She is my future." The air on the yacht was suddenly still. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the bay against the hull and the distant hum of the boat's generator. The guests were frozen, a sea of shocked faces illuminated by the deck's artful lighting. They had come for cocktails and networking. They were being given a public execution of a marriage. Arthur thrived on the tension. This was power, the power to write his own narrative, to publicly declare his old life dead and his new one begun. Serafina stood beside him, her hand in his. She was trembling, a perfect portrait of a woman overwhelmed by emotion. She had dreamed of this moment, of being chosen, of being elevated in front of all the people who had dismissed her as Arthur's girl. Arthur held her hand aloft. "Many of you," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. will judge this. You will call it scandalous. You will whisper about propriety and duty. But I call it living. I chose to stop performing a life and to start living one. Eleonora and I, we were a business merger, an artifact. This is a soulmate. He looked deep into Serafina's eyes. She was crying now, tears of genuine joy tracing mascara down her cheeks. Serafina, he said, his voice softening, you found me in the dark. You reminded me what it felt like to be alive. You didn't want my name or my money. You wanted me. A few of the more cynical investors present barely suppressed a smirk, but Serafina's belief was absolute. She nodded, weeping. And so, Arthur said, reaching into his pocket. The collective gasp was audible. This was moving faster than anyone had anticipated. He pulled out a black velvet box. He turned, guiding Serafina so they were both facing the crowd, but more importantly, perfectly silhouetted against the magnificent villa on Star Island. The symbolism was as subtle as a sledgehammer. Out with the old, cold estate. In with the new, blazing passion. I've been planning this new life for us, my love. A life worthy of your fire. A life where we can be free. He dropped to one knee. The cameras came out. Dozens of smartphones, held by some of the most powerful people in Florida, were raised to capture the moment. This would be on every gossip blog and social media feed by morning. It was exactly what Arthur wanted. Serafina Rowe, he boomed, you are my sun, my fire, my odyssey. I'm a free man, and I want to spend the rest of my life, every single day, proving I am worthy of you. He opened the box. The ring was astonishing, a massive, rectangular canary diamond, flanked by two equally impressive white diamonds. It caught the deck lights and shattered them into 1,000 pieces. It was a statement of obscene wealth. Will you marry me, Serafina? Her answer was a choked, ecstatic sob. Yes! Oh my God, yes, Arthur! He slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He stood, pulling her into a kiss that was less about love and more about possession. The crowd, sensing the finale, burst into applause. The music swelled again, this time a triumphant orchestral piece. Waiters flooded the deck, refilling glasses. Arthur let Serafina go, but kept his arm locked around her waist. He turned her to face the villa. You see that, my love? He shouted over the music, pointing to the glass palace glowing in the twilight. You see our new home? Serafina stared, her hand over her mouth. Arthur, it's the one from the picture. The very one, he beamed, taking the microphone again. His guests were all watching, mesmerized. A few of my partners, he announced, know I've been trying to acquire this property for a year. The owners were difficult, an anonymous trust, playing hard to get. He chuckled. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I don't take no for an answer. Not in business, and not in life. He raised his glass. As of last week, my final offer was accepted. It's the most expensive residential sale in Miami-Dade County this year. This drew gasps of real respect. That was a serious power move. I give you our new home, he declared. A palace for my queen. He pulled Serafina into another kiss, and this time he motioned for his personal photographer. Get this shot, Miles. Her, the ring, and the house in the background. Perfect. Serafina, ecstatic, held up her hand, the yellow diamond flashing. In the background, the villa stood, magnificent and silent. It was the perfect photograph, the perfect moment, the perfect start to their perfect life. Arthur Vance had never felt more powerful, more in control, or more completely, utterly, and apocalyptically wrong. The thrum of the music, the excited chatter of the guests, the clinking of glasses. It all stopped. Not at once, but in a slow, domino-like cascade of silence that started at the stern and spread across the deck. The cause was a new sound, one that didn't belong to the party. It was the deep, throaty growl of a high-performance engine slicing through the water. Arthur looked up, annoyed. His perfect moment was being interrupted. "What the hell is that? Tell the captain to wave them off. This is a private—" His words died in his throat. Emerging from the darkness, a smaller boat was approaching the Odyssey. It wasn't a Coast Guard patrol or a lost fisherman. It was a 1960s-era Riva Aquarama, a vessel of such iconic, understated elegance that it made Arthur's mega-yacht look like a gaudy block of flats. The boat was all polished mahogany and gleaming chrome, cutting through the water with the effortless grace of a swan. It slowed, idling just off the yacht's starboard side. A spotlight from the Odyssey's security detail automatically snapped on, illuminating the smaller boat. "Sir?" The captain's voice crackled over Arthur's earpiece. "There's a vessel here. They are requesting permission to board. They say they have an appointment." "An appointment? With me?" Arthur was furious. "I have no appointment. Get rid of them." "Sir, the passenger," she insists. "She says her name is Mrs. Vance." The blood drained from Arthur's face. He turned to the rail. In the spotlight he could see her. It was Eleonora. She was not in tears. She was not wearing a bathrobe and slippers, roused by a panicked call. She was wearing a stunning, tailored navy blue Armani pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. She looked, Arthur thought with a jolt of primal fear, like she was about to liquidate a company. Beside her sat a man in a conservative suit, holding a thick leather briefcase. Mr. Harrington, her family's ancient lawyer. "Lower the gangway," Eleonora's voice, calm and clear, carried across the water. It was not a request. "Arthur, what is she doing here?" Serafina hissed, her hand instinctively covering the massive diamond. "You said you told her." "I did," Arthur snapped, his mind racing. She must have tracked me. She's here to make a scene. The crazy. Don't let her rattle you." But he was rattled. This was not the placid, defeated woman he had left in the penthouse. This was a stranger. The crew, confused and intimidated, lowered the small side gangway. Mr. Harrington stepped aboard first, then offered his hand to Eleonora. She stepped onto the deck of the Odyssey with the confidence of an owner, not an intruder. She walked directly toward the center of the party. The 300 guests parted for her like the Red Sea, their shocked, silent faces turning from Arthur to his wife. Eleonora stopped a few feet from Arthur and Serafina. Her eyes were cold, assessing. She didn't look at Arthur. She looked at the ring on Serafina's finger. "Canary diamond," Eleonora noted, her voice conversational, as if commenting on the weather. 10, maybe 12 carats. A little gauche for my taste, but it's certainly large." Serafina flushed, half defiant, half terrified. "He loves me," she said, her voice a reedy tremor. "We're getting married." "Are you?" Eleonora finally raised her eyes to Serafina. There was no anger in them. There was something far worse. Pity. "Congratulations." Then she turned to her husband. "Eleonora," Arthur snarled, regaining a fraction of his bravado. "You are embarrassing yourself. This is a private party. Get off my boat." "Your boat?" Eleonora repeated, a tiny, humorless smile playing on her lips. "That's rather the point of this discussion, isn't it? Ownership." She took a step, walking past him. She addressed the silent crowd. "Good evening, everyone. I do apologize for the interruption. My name is Eleonora Hayes Vance." She put a slight, deliberate emphasis on Hayes. I am Arthur's wife. though I see he's in the process of a rather public resignation. A few nervous titters from the crowd. "Arthur," she said, turning back to him, "you've always had a flair for the dramatic. A mega yacht, a 300-person audience, a public proposal. It's all very... you. So much momentum." "I'm calling security," Arthur threatened, his face a mask of purple rage. "I wouldn't," Mr. Harrington said, stepping forward. He was a small, grey man, but he commanded the deck. He opened his briefcase. "You'll want to see this, as will your partners, and I suspect your new fiancé." He handed Arthur a thick, bound document. Arthur looked at the cover page. It wasn't a divorce filing. The title was Notice of Asset Seizure and Injunction, Vance Capital versus the Hayes Family Trust. His blood ran cold. What is this? This is insane. Hayes Trust? That's your family. That has nothing to do with my company. "Oh, Arthur," Eleonora sighed, walking to the edge of the deck. She looked at the glowing villa on the shore. "It has everything to do with your company. You just never bothered to read the fine print." "What fine print?" Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. The silence on the yacht was absolute. Every guest was leaning in. Every phone was recording. "The fine print on our pre-nuptial agreement, for one," Eleonora said, turning back to him. "The one you were so proud of. The one your high-powered lawyers drafted to protect you from the old money leech. You were so concerned with protecting your future earnings, you barely paid attention to the clauses about marital assets and seed capital." Mr. Harrington stepped forward, his voice as dry as old paper. "Mr. Vance, 10 years ago, when you founded Vance Capital, you were leveraged to the hilt. You were 3 weeks from defaulting on your commercial loans. You were, to put it plainly, failing." "That's a lie," Arthur spat. "Is it?" Eleonora's voice cut through his. "I remember it distinctly. I also remember transferring $7 million from my personal trust, a gesture of wifely faith, I believe we called it, to cover your margin calls. You told me it was a loan, and you'd pay it back." Arthur's mind was racing, trying to find the angle. "I did pay it back. I paid it back with interest." "You paid back the principal," Mr. Harrington corrected, "but you neglected the clause my office inserted. The Hayes-Vance Capital Clause. It stipulated that the $7 million was not a loan, but a priority equity investment. An investment that entitled the Hayes Trust to a 49% stake in your holding company, Vance Capital. Should you ever, how did we phrase it, fail to act in good faith as a marital partner." Arthur's face went white. "Good faith, a clause," Eleonora continued, "that is triggered by, among other things, demonstrable adultery, commingling of marital funds for illicit purposes, or attempting to defraud your primary investor. You, Arthur, have just hit the trifecta, and you did it in front of 300 witnesses." Serafina made a small, strangled sound. "What? What does that mean?" Eleonora finally gave Serafina her full attention. "It means, my dear, that the company your fiancé used to buy you that very impressive ring is, as of this moment, 49% mine. And since I am, as of my 35th birthday, the sole director of the Hayes Trust, that means I am Arthur's new boss." The collective audible gasp of 300 people was a physical thing. You bitch," Arthur breathed, lunging at her. He was stopped not by security, but by the 2 SEC agents who had come aboard with Mr. Harrington and who had been standing quietly by the gangway. They flanked him instantly. "I wouldn't, Mr. Vance," one said, his badge flashing. "We're just here to observe the civil injunction." Arthur froze. Eleonora hadn't even flinched. "But the house," Serafina whispered, her face ashen, the big diamond on her hand suddenly looking like a prop. Arthur bought the house. He said the sale closed. It's ours. This was the moment. Eleonora turned from her husband and looked at the beautiful, weeping young woman. This is the part I truly find disappointing, Arthur, Eleonora said, her eyes now on him. You lied to her, too. She pointed to the villa. You told her you bought that house. You told your guests you'd been in a tough negotiation with an anonymous trust. Arthur, what is the name of my family's trust? Arthur's jaw worked, but no sound came out. It's called the Hayes Family Trust, Eleonora provided. It has owned that property since my grandfather, Robert Hayes, built it in 1964. It has never been for sale. It will never be for sale. She took a step closer to Serafina. He wasn't negotiating to buy it. He was trespassing. The broker he was talking to. An investigator from Mr. Harrington's firm. The offer he made. A detailed account of every dollar he's been siphoning from his company to fund his new life. Evidence, if you will. Serafina looked from the house to Arthur, the realization dawning in slow, horrifying waves. You didn't buy it. He couldn't, Eleonora said gently. It's mine. I'm spending August there. I was just having the pool retiled. The humiliation was total. It was a perfect, silent void. Arthur Vance, the king, the shark, the master of the universe, was standing on a chartered yacht he could no longer afford, next to a mistress to whom he had proposed with a ring bought with his wife's money, pointing at a house he didn't own. You, Arthur was sputtering. You were planning this. For how long? Our whole marriage? Eleonora finally allowed a single, genuine emotion to cross her face, a profound, weary sadness. No, Arthur. I wasn't planning this. I was planning a life with you. I was your partner. I was the one managing the back end of your funds while you took the credit. I was the one who quietly tripled your holdings while you dismissed me as charity wallpaper. She shook her head. I didn't viewed as charity wallpaper. I started planning this, she said, gesturing to the scene, 6 months ago. The night I found the receipts for her apartment. The night I realized you didn't just stop loving me. You stopped respecting me. You thought I was stupid. You thought the quiet, plain girl from the cold family was a fool you could drain dry and then discard. She smoothed the lapel of her pantsuit. The Hayes family doesn't get loud, Arthur. We get structural. The silence on the deck was a crushing weight. Arthur Vance stood as a statue, his face a mottled canvas of rage and shock. He was a man who had built his world on momentum, and he had just hit a wall of solid granite. Serafina, for her part, had sunk onto one of the plush deck chairs. She was no longer crying. She was just staring. She stared at the 10-carat diamond on her finger, this massive, heavy symbol of what? A lie. A joke. She wasn't a queen. She was the jester's fool. She slowly, mechanically, twisted the ring off her finger. It felt hot, radioactive. She let it fall to the deck, where it rolled a few inches and then stopped, winking pathetically under the party lights. Eleonora observed the small, discarded treasure. A wise decision. She then turned her full attention back to her husband. Mr. Harrington stepped forward and placed the heavy injunction document into Arthur's limp hand. That document, the lawyer said, is a temporary restraining order, preventing you from accessing any liquid assets from Vance Capital, your personal accounts, or any co-mingled marital funds, effective immediately. It also freezes your trading accounts. Your partners, he gestured to the stunned circle of investors, will be receiving a full prospectus from my office by morning, detailing the, let's call it, the restructuring of the company's leadership. You can't, Arthur whispered, the words thick. The company. It's me. It's my name. Your name is on the building, Arthur, but my family's money is its foundation, Eleonora said. And the foundation is taking possession. You will be offered a severance package. A generous one, I might add. More than you deserve. She looked around at the guests, these people who had been laughing at her, dismissing her just 10 minutes earlier. Her voice was strong, clear, and carried to every corner of the deck. Thank you all for coming to my husband's going-away party. I trust you've enjoyed the champagne. He certainly has a taste for the finer things. She walked back toward the gangway, her posture perfect. The two SEC agents, their work done, followed her. Eleonora, wait! Arthur's voice was desperate, a plea. It was the first time in years he had said her name with anything other than disdain. She stopped, but she didn't turn around. What am I supposed to do? He asked, a small broken sound. Eleonora paused, looking out over the dark water toward the lights of Miami. I don't know, Arthur. Perhaps you should try living authentically. I believe those were your words. She glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes finding his in the dark. You wanted a new life. You wanted to be free of your cold wife. You've gotten your wish. You are now, officially, free. She gave a curt, polite nod to the captain. Captain, please ensure Mr. Vance and his guest are safely returned to the marina. Mr. Harrington's office will settle the charter bill on Monday. She then descended the gangway with the same unhurried grace with which she had arrived. Mr. Harrington followed. They stepped onto the mahogany reaver. The engine roared to life, a sound of controlled, elegant power. The 300 guests on the Odyssey watched as the small boat carved a phosphorescent wake in the bay, heading not back to the marina, but directly toward Star Island. They watched as it docked at the private pier of the magnificent glass villa. They watched as the lights on the dock came on, and as the small, powerful figure in the navy blue pantsuit stepped onto her property, disappearing into the light. On the yacht, there was silence. The party was over. The music was dead. Arthur Vance was left alone in the center of the deck, holding a legal document that had just erased his life. Serafina finally moved. She stood up, barefoot, her red dress looking cheap and garish in the sudden, harsh quiet. She looked at Arthur, her eyes empty of adoration, empty of everything except a cold, hard understanding. She didn't say a word. She simply walked away, heading below deck to find her purse, just another asset to be discarded. Arthur didn't watch her go. He was still staring at the house, a kingdom he had tried to steal, only to learn he was never even in the game. The villa, the mahogany reaver, the haze, idled perfectly as it slid into the boat, slip beneath the villa. The sound of its engine was a soft, contented purr, a stark contrast to the thrumming, anxious heart of the mega-yacht it left behind. Eleonora stepped onto the dock. The air here was different, cleaner, fragrant with night-blooming jasmine that snaked up the stone columns. Mr. Harrington followed, carrying his briefcase. The villa's lights were on, casting a warm, honey-gold glow onto the white stone patio. It was not a fortress, Eleonora thought. It was a home. Well, Mr. Harrington said, the first to speak since they'd left the yacht. I believe that went according to plan. Eleonora walked into the main salon, a vast, two-story room with a wall of glass overlooking the bay. In the distance, the Odyssey was still anchored, a dark shape punctuated by too many lights, like a gaudy, dying beetle. She went to a simple bar set into a teak cabinet. She ignored the crystal decanters of whiskey and brandy. Instead, she opened a small refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of still water. She poured it into a plain glass. "Your grandfather would have been very proud, Eleonora," Mr. Harrington said, allowing himself a rare, thin smile. "Robert Hayes always said, 'Never play your hand until you've already won.' He also said, 'The loudest man in the room is the weakest,'" Eleonora murmured, taking a small sip. The water was cold. It grounded her. She was not triumphant. There was no joy in this, no giddy rush of victory. There was only the profound, bone-deep weariness of a battle concluded. For 6 months, she had lived a double life, her quiet days of charity work, a perfect cover for a campaign of meticulous, brutal financial warfare. Every email she sent, every call she made, was a chess move, repositioning her family's assets, insulating her trust, and laying the legal groundwork to decapitate Arthur's empire. "The injunction is ironclad," Harrington continued, all business once more. "The trading accounts were frozen at 5:01 p.m. Eastern. The partners are receiving their notifications as we speak. The first wire will detail the Hayes Trust's emergency invocation of the 49% priority equity clause. The second will be a call for an emergency board meeting, Monday at 9 a.m., with you as interim chair." "And the penthouse?" she asked, not turning from the window. "The locks are being changed. His key fobs, his access codes, all deactivated. His personal effects will be packed by a bonded service and sent to a storage unit." "And her?" Harrington's expression was neutral. The South Beach apartment lease was in a shell LLC, funded directly from Vance Capital's discretionary account. That LLC is now frozen. The lease will be terminated for non-payment. She will have 48 hours to vacate. Eleonora nodded. "Total, structural." "And the SEC agents?" "They were very observant," Harrington said. "Arthur's public declaration of gifting the villa, a non-existent, unpurchased asset, to his new fiancée in front of investors after claiming for months that he was in negotiations to acquire it. It's not just adultery, Eleonora. It's wire fraud. It's market manipulation. He was using the rumor of that acquisition to inflate the perceived value of his personal brand, and by extension, his fund. They will be very interested in his trading records from the past 6 months. She had known all this. She had planned it. But hearing it laid bare in the quiet of her grandfather's house made it feel real and terrible. "He built a company, Mr. Harrington," she said quietly. "A real one, under all the lies, under the ego. There was something real there once." "And you funded it, Mrs. Vance," the lawyer countered, his voice firm. "You saved it, and now you have reclaimed it. What you do with it, dissolve it, run it, sell it for parts, is entirely up to you. You are, for the first time in a decade, your own woman." Eleonora looked at her reflection in the glass. The quiet, mousy wife was gone. In her place was a woman she barely recognized, a woman in a power suit, with eyes that had seen the blueprint of her husband's betrayal and drawn a better one. She was the new monarch, and the crown felt impossibly heavy. The yacht back on the Odyssey. The silence was a disease. The string quartet had packed up and fled on a crew boat. The guests had evaporated, melting away in a silent, mortified mass, catching rides on whatever tenders could be summoned. They didn't say goodbye to Arthur. They avoided his gaze as if he were a leper. His social and professional destruction had been so total, so absolute, that they were terrified to be caught in the blast radius. Arthur stood alone on the deck, the humid night air pressing in on him. The document was a damp, crumpled ball in his fist. He was shaking, a low, adrenal tremor. This was a nightmare. He would wake up. His phone, which he'd left on a table, began to buzz. It was Robert, his former partner. He stared at it. It buzzed again. Henry, then a text from his lawyer, a string of frantic question marks. He's blocked my accounts. The thought was so absurd, he almost laughed. She blocked my accounts. Eleonora. He could see the lights of the villa across the bay. He could almost imagine her inside, laughing, drinking champagne with her ancient lawyer, the ice queen, the wallpaper. She had been a ghost in his life for years, and now he realized he was the one who was dead. He heard a sound, a footstep. Serafina. She was not the tearful, ecstatic woman from an hour ago. Her face was scrubbed of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed but cold. She was wearing simple black slacks and a t-shirt, her crimson gown presumably bundled in the duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She was all sharp edges and coiled rage. "Serafina," he said, his voice hoarse. He took a step toward her, his hand outstretched, a drowning man grasping for a piece of driftwood. "Baby, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. A corporate takeover. It's illegal. We can fight this. Our lawyers—" "Shut up." Her voice was flat, dead. "Just shut your mouth, Arthur. I don't want to hear another lie." "It's not a lie. She's a vindictive—" "The house!" Serafina's voice cracked, rising. "You lied about the house. You stood there, in front of all those people, in front of me, and you pointed at another woman's home, her home, and you called me its queen. You made me your prop in your stupid, pathetic war with your wife. A war you lost. I did it for us," he pleaded, the lie sounding thin even to his own ears. "I wanted to give you everything. You wanted to show me everything," she corrected, her voice dripping with a venom he had never heard. "You wanted an audience. You wanted someone to adore you. You didn't want a soulmate, Arthur. You wanted a mirror, and I was stupid enough to reflect you." She walked past him to the crumpled ring still lying on the deck. She stared at it. "A son for your son," she whispered. She kicked it. The massive diamond skittered across the deck and disappeared over the side with a tiny, unsatisfying plip into the dark water. Arthur gasped. That was $12 million. "It was hers," Serafina hissed. "It was never yours to give. Just like the apartment. Just like the car. Just like everything." She turned to him, her face a mask of cold clarity. She was a survivor. She had attached herself to a shark, believing he would protect her. Now she saw he was just a remora, attached to a far greater predator. And that predator had just shaken him loose. "I have one question," she said. "The apartment. Is the lease in your name?" Arthur's silence was her answer. "Right," she said, nodding to herself. She slung her bag higher on her shoulder. "Captain," she yelled toward the bridge, "I am a guest on this. Is this boat? I demand to be taken to shore. Now. Alone." "Serafina, don't do this," Arthur begged, grabbing her arm. "Where will you go? You have nothing." She wrenched her arm free, her nails digging into his skin. "I've always had nothing, Arthur. The difference is, now I know it." She looked at him one last time. This man she had worshipped, this god who had been revealed as a hollow statue. "You didn't just lose your money, Arthur. You lost everything. Because you had everything. You had a woman who was a queen, and you threw her away because you were too stupid and too arrogant to see it." She turned and marched to the gangway, where a crew member was dutifully lowering a tender. The marina. The long, slow ride back to the marina was a journey through hell. The Odyssey was no longer a symbol of power. It was a barge of shame. The crew, now just doing their jobs, avoided him. They docked. The red carpet was gone. There was no one waiting. Arthur Vance stepped onto the solid ground of the marina. His linen suit was wrinkled, stained with a drop of champagne. His phone was buzzing, a frantic, useless brick in his pocket. He tried to call his driver. The call went straight to voicemail. He'd been cut off. He tried to open his Uber app. Payment declined. He laughed. A short, sharp, hysterical bark. The senator, the hedge fund managers, Serafina, his wife, all gone. He was a king an hour ago. Now he was a man who couldn't even pay for a taxi. He started walking. He had no destination. He was a man of perpetual forward motion, with nowhere to go. He walked out of the marina, his expensive Italian shoes echoing on the concrete. He reached the main road. The city of Miami, his city, sparkled around him, a paradise of light and wealth that was no longer his. He looked across the black water of the bay. He couldn't see the villa, but he knew she was there. Eleonora, his wife, the wallpaper, the ghost. He had built his entire life on the principle of momentum. He had just learned, in the most public and brutal way possible, what happens when you underestimate the object you've been pushing against. Sometimes it doesn't just stop you. It pushes back, and it crushes you completely. He had spent his life acquiring things, only to realize, in one catastrophic night, that the only thing he'd ever truly owned was a $7 million loan from his wife. And the interest, he now understood, was everything. What a story. Can you believe the audacity of Arthur and the absolute, ice-cold brilliance of Eleonora Hayes Vance? She proves that the best revenge isn't loud, it's structural, it's legal, and it's total. What do you think Arthur and Serafina did next? Where do you go after a humiliation that public and that complete? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you love stories of epic twists, poetic justice, and powerful women who refuse to be underestimated, then you have come to the right place. We hunt down the most incredible real-life dramas and bring them to you every single week. So, if you haven't already, don't forget to show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good revenge story. And most importantly, click subscribe and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. He was a man who had everything. A corner office on the 50th floor, a tailored suit worth more than most cars, and a ruthless ambition that had scorched everyone beneath him. His secretary Clara was just another rung on his ladder, diligent, intelligent, and inconveniently pregnant. When his ambitious mistress, Serafina, wanted Clara gone, he did it without a second thought. He fired her, publicly, humiliatingly. What he didn't know, as he watched her walk away, was that Clara wasn't just his secretary. She was Clara Hayes, the only daughter of the man who owned the entire building, and the reckoning was just beginning. Julian Vance lived his life 50 floors above New York City, and he believed this altitude granted him a kind of divinity. His office at Vanguard Equity Partners wasn't just a room, it was a testament to his arrival. It was a cube of glass, suspended over the city, and from it he viewed the world, and his employees, as tiny, manageable subjects. Julian was a man carved from ambition. At 38, he was the youngest senior vice president in the firm's history, and he wore his success like armor. Bespoke Tom Ford suits, a Patek Philippe watch that chimed on the quarter hour, and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. Outside that glass cube sat Clara Hayes. Clara was, in every way, the antithesis of Julian's flash. She was quiet, methodical, and possessed an intelligence that was as deep as it was unobtrusive. For 2 years, she had been the perfect secretary. She anticipated his needs, corrected his mistakes before he made them, and managed his chaotic schedule with an unnerving calm. She was, as Julian often bragged to his peers, a mind reader. But 6 months ago, Clara had become an inconvenience. She was pregnant. Her body, once neatly professional, was now undeniably round. Her presence, once efficient, now seemed to Julian to be a constant, ticking reminder of biological messiness. He loathed it. It wasn't just the impending maternity leave. A scheduling black hole, he'd called it. It was the visual of it. It screamed weakness. It screamed domesticity. It screamed everything Julian had sacrificed to get where he was. "Clara!" he barked through the intercom, not looking up from his terminal. "My 10 a.m. client notes. Now." "They're on your desk, Julian," her calm voice replied instantly. "I placed them there an hour ago. Open to page 3, where you'll find the discrepancies in their Q3 report." Julian glanced down. There they were. He grunted, annoyed at her preemptive competence. His annoyance was being actively stoked by Serafina Croft. Serafina was the firm's new head of strategic marketing, hired 3 months prior. She was fire to Clara's ice, all sharp angles, blood-red lipstick, and a laugh that echoed with undisguised avarice. She and Julian had fallen into a discreet, then flagrant affair almost immediately. Serafina didn't just want Julian's affection, she wanted his power, and she saw Clara as a stubborn obstacle. Serafina sauntered over to Clara's desk, leaning against it hip first, deliberately crowding Clara's space. She was holding a steaming mug. "Still here, Clara?" Serafina purred, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "I'm surprised you can still fit behind that desk. You're blooming." Clara didn't look up from her screen. "I'm fine, Miss Croft. Can I help you with something?" "Oh, just admiring your dedication," Serafina said, taking a sip. "Julian is so kind to let you keep working. Most women in your condition would be at home, nesting or something." A few junior analysts snickered. Clara's fingers paused on the keyboard. Beside her, Mary, the older executive assistant for another partner, shot Serafina a venomous look. Mary liked Clara. She'd seen ambitious sharks like Serafina devour good people for sport. "I'm more effective here, Miss Croft," Clara said evenly. "Are you, though?" Serafina shot back. Julian was just complaining that the Sanderson files were late. "Pregnancy brain, I suppose?" Clara's head snapped up. "The Sanderson files are not due until tomorrow at 5. Julian wanted them today. He must have forgotten to tell you," Serafina said, with a fake pout. "Don't worry, I handled it for him." Clara watched her walk away, a perfectly straight seam running up the back of her designer skirt. Clara looked at her digital scheduler. The Sanderson deadline was, indeed, tomorrow. Serafina was lying. She was building a narrative. This wasn't the first time. For weeks, Serafina had been helpfully pointing out Clara's lapses. A meeting missed that had been rescheduled by Serafina herself. A coffee order that was wrong, though Julian had changed his preference that morning. Small, insidious cuts designed to bleed Clara's reputation dry. And Julian, blinded by Serafina's ambition and his own, was letting it happen. Later that day, Julian had a crisis. A major client, the pension fund for the state of Ohio, was threatening to pull their $800 million portfolio. Their representative was on a conference call, and he was furious. "I'm looking at this proposal, Vance, and it's a joke," the man yelled through the speakerphone. "You've miscalculated our exposure by nearly 15%. This is amateur hour." Julian was sweating. He was shuffling papers, his charm failing. "Mr. Henderson, if you'll just let me explain." Clara, listening from her desk, quietly printed a single sheet of paper. She walked into the glass office, ignoring Serafina, who had perched herself on the guest chair, and slid the paper in front of Julian. On it were 3 bullet points. Julian paused. He read them. His posture changed. "Mr. Henderson," Julian said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk. "I haven't miscalculated. You're looking at the projections before we factored in the new federal bond acquisitions. If you'll turn to Appendix D, subsection 4A, which my team prepared this morning, you'll see we've actually shielded your exposure. The 15% discrepancy isn't a loss. It's a hedge that's already paying dividends." There was a silence on the line. "Well, why didn't you say so?" "I prefer to let the numbers speak for themselves," Julian said, leaning back. He won the call. The client was pacified. When he hung up, Serafina ran a hand up his arm. "You were brilliant, Julian. You saved us." Julian straightened his tie, his gaze falling on Clara, who was quietly retrieving the paper. "Clara, get the Henderson contingency file updated, and next time, try to keep up." Clara paused at the door, her back to him. "Of course, Julian." She walked out. Julian didn't see the look on her face, but Mary at the next desk did. It wasn't defeat, it wasn't sadness, it was a cold, calculating patience. It was the look of a chess master watching her opponent knowingly walk into a trap. The trap was being set, but not by Clara. It was being set by Julian and Serafina over $300 stakes at the Onyx Room, a restaurant so dark and exclusive it felt like a vault. "She has to go, Julian," Serafina said, swirling a glass of Cabernet. The crimson liquid caught the light from the single candle. "She makes you look soft." Julian loosened his tie, away from the fluorescent lights of the office. His ambition felt purer, more justified. "She's pregnant, Sarah. Firing her is a legal nightmare. The optics are terrible." "Optics?" Serafina laughed, a low, throaty sound. "We're not talking about optics. We're talking about your future. The partnership. The Asia-Pacific expansion. Do you think David Morrison got to be CEO by worrying about optics? He got there by being decisive, by cutting liabilities." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "And she is a liability. She's slow, she's dowdy, and she's watching us. I don't like it." Julian frowned. "She's a secretary. She's not watching anything." "Isn't she?" Serafina countered. "She saved you on that Henderson call. How did she know that? How was she that prepared? It's like she's auditing you. It's creepy, Julian. And frankly, I want her desk. I want to be right outside your office. I can be your partner in this, Julian. Your real partner. But not while she's there, playing Mother Superior." The image she painted was potent. Serafina, in her sharp suits, sitting guard at his door. Serafina, anticipating his real needs. It was an intoxicating thought. The pregnancy had repulsed him, but Serafina was right. Clara's quiet competence was, in its own way, a threat. It felt like judgment. "Fine," Julian said, his voice hardening. "We cut the liability, but it has to be clean. It has to be for cause." "Then we find a cause," Serafina smiled, raising her glass. The cause began the next day. It was a two-pronged attack: manufacture a performance issue and sabotage her reliability. The first step was a file. The North Star acquisition was Julian's flagship project, a $2 billion deal. The final signatory papers were due by courier to London by 10 a.m. Friday. This was a hard deadline. Missing it would incur massive penalties. Clara had the package prepped by Wednesday. She logged it for international courier pickup, triple-checked the customs forms, and placed the bright red, wax-sealed envelope in the secure outgoing mail slot. She sent a confirmation email to Julian. "North Star package is secure and logged for 8 a.m. pickup tomorrow, Thursday. It will arrive in London with 24 hours to spare." Julian read the email. Serafina was leaning over his shoulder. "See?" he whispered. "She's on top of it." "It's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Serafina whispered back. She waited until 5:30 p.m., when Clara, moving a little slower than usual, packed her bag and headed for the elevator. Clara was the last to leave their section. Mary, the other assistant, had left hours ago. At 5:35 p.m., Serafina walked calmly to the mailroom. She flirted with the night shift clerk, asked him to find a lost earring near the sorting table. While he was distracted, her hand darted into the International Secure slot. She retrieved the bright red envelope. She didn't destroy it. She simply slipped it into her oversized designer handbag. At 7 p.m., she and Julian were in his office. He was pacing. "This is insane, Sarah. This is a felony." "It's a clerical error, Julian," she cooed, placing the envelope on his desk. "Clara's error. She must have forgotten to put it in the slot. Look, here it is, sitting on her desk, buried under a memo. She must have left it this afternoon. How tragic. How forgetful." She then moved to Clara's computer. Clara, trusting, had her password saved in a desktop file for Julian, in case of emergency. This, Serafina decided, was an emergency. She logged into Clara's email. She found the confirmation message sent to Julian. "North Star package is secure and logged." Serafina smiled, and with a click of the mouse, she deleted it. Not just from Clara's sent folder, but from the server-side recall. Then, she went into Clara's scheduler and deleted the courier pickup appointment. "There," she said, logging out. "No email, no appointment, just a package sitting on her desk. Missed. A multi-billion-dollar deal, jeopardized by her incompetence. By her pregnancy brain." Julian stared at the package. This was the point of no return. This wasn't just firing someone, it was destroying them. He picked up the package. He opened Clara's desk drawer, the one with her spare sweaters and prenatal vitamins, and dropped the package inside, kicking it to the very back. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow. "Good," Serafina said, kissing him hard. "Now tomorrow, we'll be in the Chicago office. We'll be unreachable. By the time anyone realizes the package never left, it will be Friday morning. It will be too late, and it will be entirely her fault." They left the office, partners in crime. Back in the darkness, the green light on Clara's computer terminal blinked off, but across the hall, a small red light on a ceiling-mounted security camera, the one Julian always assumed was just for show, remained on. It had captured Serafina's 5:35 p.m. visit to the mailroom. It had captured her logging into Clara's computer. It had captured everything. Friday morning was electric with panic. The first call came at 9 a.m., London time, which was 4 a.m. in New York. Julian, asleep in his high-rise apartment, ignored it. The second came at 5 a.m. from his boss, David Morrison. Julian answered that one. "Vance, where in God's name is the North Star package?" Morrison bellowed, his voice cracking with transatlantic static. "Our London team is sitting here with the board, and the documents are not here. The 10 a.m. deadline is in 1 hour. Julian feigned groggy confusion. "What? That's impossible." Clara confirmed it was sent. "Well, it wasn't," Morrison roared. "You fix this, Vance. You fix this now, or your partnership is dead." The line clicked. Julian was wide awake. He frantically called the office. Clara, who always arrived at 7 a.m., picked up. "Clara, where is the North Star package?" Julian yelled, genuine panic now mixing with his manufactured rage. "It's... what?" Clara's voice was instantly alert. "Julian, it's in London. I sent it Wednesday for Thursday pickup." "It's not in London. The courier company has no record of a pickup. Did you log it?" "Yes, of course I logged it. I emailed you the confirmation." Clara was typing furiously. "Julian, the email. It's gone. The scheduler appointment. It's not here." "What do you mean it's not there?" Julian spat. "Did you forget? Clara, did you forget to send the most important package of my career?" "No, Clara was stunned. She was searching her desk, her mind racing. I don't understand. Find it, Clara. Find it, or you are finished." Julian hung up. He showered, shaved, and dressed with methodical care. He put on his most expensive suit. Today was a day for an execution. He arrived at the office at 9 a.m. sharp. The floor was a morgue. Everyone knew the North Star deal was dead. The firm would face millions in penalties, but worse, the reputational damage was catastrophic. Clara was pale, standing by her desk, her hands resting on her stomach. She looked defeated. "My office, Clara." "Now," Julian said, his voice devoid of all warmth. Serafina was already inside, sitting in the guest chair, examining her nails. She looked up as Clara entered, a mask of false sympathy on her face. "Clara, I'm so sorry. This is just a tragedy." "Julian, I don't know what happened," Clara began, her voice shaking but firm. "I took that package to the mailroom myself. I logged it. I emailed you. Someone. Julian cut her off, his voice dangerously low. "Or something? Like pregnancy brain, Clara? Is that the something?" Clara recoiled as if struck. "How dare you?" "I dare," Julian said, stepping closer, "because I trusted you. I looked like a fool this morning. This firm is now exposed to litigation and ruin, all because my mind-reader secretary was too busy picking out nursery colors to do her one simple job." "That is not true," Clara said, her voice rising. "I have never missed a deadline. I have never failed you. This is a mistake. This is wrong." "It's a failure, Clara. A catastrophic failure," Julian said. He leaned on his desk, the picture of a disappointed, betrayed leader. "Serafina was the one who found the package. Go on, Sarah, tell her." Serafina looked up, her eyes wide with mock sadness. "Clara, I found it this morning, in your desk drawer, under a pile of baby magazines." This was a lie too far, a vicious, unnecessary embellishment. "What?" Clara whispered. She physically staggered back. No, I would never. Someone put it there." "Who, Clara?" Julian laughed, a cold, barking sound. "The mailroom gnome? Serafina? Me? Do you hear how paranoid you sound? You're hormonal, you're forgetful, and you just cost this company its biggest deal of the decade." He circled his desk and stood over her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. "I can't have unreliable people on my team," he said. "The partnership is expanding. We're moving into Asia. I need sharks. Clara, not this." He gestured vaguely at her stomach. Clara's eyes, which had been wide with shock, suddenly narrowed. The fear vanished, replaced by that same cold, calculating calm Mary had seen before. "Julian," she said, her voice quiet, "you are making a terrible mistake." "No," he said. "My mistake was not doing this months ago. You're fired, Clara, effective immediately." "Julian, you can't," Serafina said, playing her part. "I can and I am," Julian snapped. "Performance. Gross negligence. I have more than cause. Security is on their way up." The entire office was watching through the glass walls. They could hear the raised voices. Mary had her hand over her mouth. "You're firing me," Clara stated, not a question. "Because of a package you know I sent. You're firing me, 6 months pregnant, to give my desk to your mistress." The air left the room. Julian's face went from angry to purple. Serafina shot to her feet. "How dare you!" Serafina shrieked. "Shut up, Serafina!" Clara said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. She never broke eye contact with Julian. You will regret this, Julian Vance. You will regret this more than any other decision in your short, pathetic life. Get her out, Julian choked out, pressing the security button on his phone. 2 uniformed guards arrived. Mr. Vance? Ms. Hayes is no longer an employee. Please escort her from the building. The guards looked uncomfortable. Escorting a visibly pregnant woman out was a new low. Ma'am, if you'll come with us. Clara didn't look at them. She looked only at Julian. She let the silence stretch, imprinting his furious, triumphant face into her memory. Then she turned, with all the dignity she could muster, and walked out of the glass office. The guards followed. Someone had already brought a cardboard box to her desk. She didn't have much. A framed photo, a coffee mug, a small plant. Mary rushed over, tears in her eyes. Clara, I'm so sorry. I know you didn't. It's all right, Mary, Clara said, her voice soft now. It's not your fault. She placed her few items in the box. As she did, her sleeve rode up, revealing a simple, elegant watch. It wasn't a Rolex or a Patek. It was a vintage Cartier, understated, but worth more than Julian's entire collection. No one noticed. She picked up the box. The entire floor was silent, watching her walk of shame to the elevators. Serafina was standing in the doorway of Julian's office, a triumphant smirk on her face. Clara passed her and paused. You know, Clara whispered, just for Serafina. The camera in the 50th floor hallway. It has a surprisingly clear view of the mailroom. You should really fix your hair before you commit a felony next time. Serafina's face turned to chalk. Clara smiled just once and walked to the elevator. The doors opened. She stepped inside, box in hand, and as the door slid shut, she allowed herself one single shaky breath. Then she pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her husband. She hit a number on her speed dial. Dad, she said, as the elevator began its descent. It's done. He did it. He fired me. A deep, kind voice rumbled on the other end. Are you all right, sweetheart? I'm fine, Dad. But Vanguard Equity is not. The rot is worse than we thought. I'll be there in an hour, the voice said. It's time I came out of retirement. Clara didn't live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment. She lived in a sprawling, 5-story brownstone on the Upper East Side, a fortress of old money and quiet elegance. The doorman, a kind man named Patrick, who had known her since she was a girl, rushed to take her box. Ms. Hayes, he said, his face creased with worry. You're home early. Is everything all right? Everything is precisely as it should be, Patrick, Clara said, managing a smile. Is my father here? Mr. Hayes is in the library, Mum. He's been waiting for you. She walked past the soaring ceilings and the original Rothko paintings in the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. She entered the library, a room panelled in dark mahogany and smelling of old books and leather. Harrison Hayes stood by the window, looking out over the private garden. He was a man in his late 60s, but he radiated an energy that shamed men half his age. He wasn't tall, but he was broad, with a full head of white hair and eyes so blue they seemed to bore through steel. This was the man who had built Vanguard Equity Partners from nothing, a legendary, almost mythical figure on Wall Street. The press called him the Architect. For the last 5 years he had been happily retired, leaving the day-to-day to his hand-picked successor, David Morrison. He turned as she entered. Clara. He enveloped her in a hug, his hand going to her belly. And how is my grandchild? He's kicking, Clara smiled, leaning into him. He's as indignant as I am. He has my blood, after all, Harrison chuckled. He led her to a deep leather armchair and poured her a glass of water. Tell me everything. From the top. Clara recounted the entire sordid affair. The Henderson call, the missed package, the lies, Serafina, the public humiliation. Harrison listened, his face impassive. He was a man who listened for a living, and his stillness was more terrifying than any rage. He used the phrase, "pregnancy brain?" Harrison asked, his voice soft. He did, and then he gestured to my stomach and said, "I need sharks, not this." Harrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the blue had turned to ice. Julian Vance, I remember him. Wharton, same as you. Top of his class. I thought he was hungry. I didn't realize he was depraved. This had all been Clara's idea. A year ago, she had been a rising star at a rival firm, already a junior partner. But she'd been hearing things about her father's company. Rumors, whispers of a toxic Shark Tank culture that had taken root since his retirement. Talk of bullying, of shady accounting, of good people being pushed out. "It's my legacy, Dad," she had told him. "It's our name on the building. I won't let it be rotted from the inside." She'd had one condition. She would go in with her mother's maiden name, Hayes. No one would know who she was. She'd start as a floater, learn the systems, and find the source of the rot. Her father had argued, but she was as stubborn as he was. Her credentials were so good, she was placed as Julian Vance's secretary within a month. His reputation as a difficult manager was legendary, and no one else would take the job. "I thought he was just an arrogant bully, Dad," Clara said, sipping her water. "But this is criminal. Serafina Croft and he, they're stealing." "Stealing?" Harrison sat up. "You have proof?" "More than proof," Clara said. She walked to the desk and pulled out a slim, encrypted flash drive. Julian thought I was reading baby magazines. I was running forensic accounting on his discretionary marketing funds, the ones he directs to Serafina. She plugged the drive into a laptop. Serafina isn't just his mistress. She's his launderer. 3 months ago, she incorporated a shell company, Croft Media Solutions. Since then, Julian has approved over $4 million in consulting fees to this company. The invoices are for market synergy analysis and brand strategy. They're boilerplate nonsense. She pulled up another file. Here are the bank transfers from Croft Media Solutions to an offshore account in the Caymans, an account held by a holding company. And guess who the sole director of that holding company is? "Julian Vance," Harrison finished, his voice grim. "He wasn't firing me because I'm pregnant," Clara said, the pieces clicking into place. "He was firing me because I was there. I was the one who processed his expense reports. I was the one who saw the invoices. He and Serafina, they thought I was just a dumb, pregnant secretary. They got sloppy. They were afraid I was getting too close." "The North Star package," Harrison said. "It wasn't just to get you fired. It was a distraction, a big, messy, public execution to draw everyone's attention away from the real crime." "Exactly. And they used my pregnancy as the perfect, believable excuse for my incompetence." Harrison stood and walked back to the window. The silence in the room was heavy. "David Morrison," Harrison finally said. "He's a good man, but he's blind. He wants to see the best in people. He let this happen." "What do we do now?" Clara asked. Harrison turned. The kindness was gone from his face, replaced by the cool, lethal focus of the architect. "Now? Now we remind them whose name is on the building." He picked up his phone. "Robert, get the jet ready. We're going to the office. And call an emergency meeting of the entire board of directors. Tell them Harrison Hayes is back." He looked at his daughter, a fierce pride in his eyes. "And Clara, it's time for you to change out of your secretary's uniform. You're going to need your Wharton suit for this." Julian Vance felt like a king. He had slept the sleep of the victorious. The North Star deal was a disaster, yes, but he had already spun it. He had spent all of Friday afternoon in crisis meetings with David Morrison, the CEO. "David, I am shattered," Julian had said, a masterpiece of feigned grief. "I trusted her. I think I was too sensitive to her condition. I didn't want to add to her stress, so I wasn't as vigilant. I blame myself." Morrison, a man who valued empathy, had bought it. "It's a terrible lapse, Julian, but you're right. The timing, it's a mess. Don't worry. Our lawyers will handle the fallout. You just focus on the partnership. We need your leadership." The partnership. It was still his. He had cut the liability, and he was being rewarded for it. Now it was Monday morning. He walked into the lobby of the Vanguard Tower, his $3,000 leather shoes clicking on the granite. He nodded curtly to the security guard, his mind on Serafina, who was already upstairs. She had officially moved her things to Clara's old desk, right outside his glass cube. Everything was in its right place. The elevator was packed with junior analysts, all of whom went silent when he stepped in. He was a god to them. Terrifying, but a god. When he stepped out onto the 50th floor, however, the atmosphere was wrong. It wasn't the usual Monday morning hustle. It was silent, tense. Mary, the older assistant, was at her desk, her eyes red. When she saw Julian, she gave him a look of such pure, unadulterated contempt that it actually made him pause. "Good morning, Mary," he said. Mary just turned back to her screen. He shrugged it off. He walked toward his office. Serafina was not at her new desk. Strange. Then he saw it. An email flagged, urgent mandatory, had arrived at 8:01 a.m. Subject, Emergency Board and Senior Partner Meeting, 9 US a.m. Location, the Founders Boardroom, 52nd floor. Attendance, mandatory, no exceptions. Julian's heart gave a little thrill. This was it. The North Star fallout was over, and this was his promotion. They were gathering the partners to announce him. They were probably fast-tracking it to show the firm was stable, moving forward. He checked his reflection in the glass, straightened his Brioni tie. He was ready. He took the private executive elevator to the 52nd floor. This floor was for board meetings only. It was quiet, opulent, and smelled of old money and furniture polish. He pushed open the massive oak double doors to the founder's boardroom and stopped dead. The room was full. The entire executive board, all 12 members, were seated. David Morrison, the CEO, was there, looking pale and nervous, not at the head of the table, but on the side. At the head of the table, in the high-backed chair that had sat empty for 5 years, was Harrison Hayes. Julian's blood turned to ice water. He had never met Harrison Hayes. He had only seen the oil portrait of him in the lobby. The man in the portrait was smiling. The man at the table was not. "Mr. Vance," Harrison said, his voice quiet but echoing in the cavernous room. "You're late. Take a seat." Julian's legs felt like lead. He fumbled into the only empty chair. It was at the far end of the table, opposite Harrison. He felt like he was being judged from a mile away. "Where is Serafina Croft?" Julian managed to ask. "Ms. Croft is indisposed," Harrison said. "She's with our head of security and our internal audit team. It seems there are some irregularities in her marketing budget. But we'll get to that." Julian's mouth went dry. This was not a promotion. "I have been retired for 5 years," Harrison began, his eyes sweeping the table, landing on every single board member. "I left this firm, Vanguard, in your hands. I trusted you to maintain the culture I built, a culture of integrity, of diligence, and of respect." He steepled his fingers, his icy blue gaze finally landing and staying on Julian. "Instead, I find a culture of bullying, of theft, and of staggering incompetence. Mr. Morrison, you were CEO. How did this happen?" David Morrison looked like he was going to be sick. "Harrison, I had no idea. The internal reports, Harrison cut him off, were doctored. The profits from Mr. Vance's division, for example, have been exaggerated. His successes, it seems, were not his own." Julian gripped the arms of his chair. "Mr. Hayes, I don't know what you've been told, but my division is the most profitable in the firm. The Henderson call just last week." "Ah, yes. The Henderson call," Harrison said, a thin smile playing on his lips. "The one you brilliantly saved. A call where you miscalculated a client's exposure by 15%, and your secretary had to slide you the answer." Julian was speechless. How do you—" "I know," Harrison said, "because my head of internal review told me. You see, I've had someone on the inside for the last 8 months. Someone I trust implicitly. Someone with a Wharton MBA, a background in forensic accounting, and a vested interest in this company's good name." Harrison nodded to the double doors. "You can come in now." The doors opened. In walked Clara Hayes. She was not the Clara he knew. The mousy brown hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. The drab maternity blouses were gone, replaced by a dark navy blue Armani pantsuit, custom-tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. She wore her power as comfortably as he wore his arrogance. She looked, Julian realized with a jolt of pure terror, exactly like the man at the other end of the table. She was not carrying a box. She was carrying a leather-bound portfolio. "Clara," Julian breathed, his voice a dry rasp. The rest of the board was staring, their minds scrambling to connect the dots. "That's Ms. Hayes Donovan to you, Mr. Vance," Clara said, her voice clear and cold. She took a seat at the table, to the right of her father. "Clara Hayes Donovan, daughter of Harrison Hayes, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, the new Chief Operating Officer of Vanguard Equity Partners." David Morrison lunged forward. "Harrison, this is my daughter, David," Harrison snapped, "and she is the only person in this room who has done her job. Please, Clara, proceed." Clara opened her portfolio. "Good morning, gentlemen. For the last 8 months, I have been working as an executive assistant to Mr. Vance. My father and I were concerned about the cultural rot that was eroding this firm's foundation. We were right to be." She looked directly at Julian. Her eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were diagnostic. "Mr. Vance," she began, "on Friday, you fired me for gross negligence, specifically for failing to courier the North Star acquisition documents." You didn't send them," Julian stammered, falling back on his lie. "You left them in your desk. Serafina found them." "No," Clara said flatly. "I did not. On Wednesday at 4:51 p.m., I personally logged the package and placed it in the mailroom's secure bin. At 5:37 p.m., she nodded to a man in the corner who dimmed the lights and turned on the large projector screen. Ms. Serafina Croft entered the mailroom. The screen lit up with grainy, time-stamped security footage. Serafina clear as day, distracting the clerk and stealing the red envelope. A collective gasp went around the room. At 7:14 p.m., Clara continued, as the footage changed, Ms. Croft and Mr. Vance are seen entering his office. At 7:19 p.m., Ms. Croft is seen logging into my terminal, using my credentials. She proceeds to delete my confirmation email and the courier appointment. The video was silent, but the implications were deafening. Julian was white. "And at 7:21 p.m., Clara said, her voice dropping, "Mr. Vance is seen taking the North Star package and placing it inside my desk drawer." The video showed him do it. The board turned as one to stare at him. You, Julian sputtered. "You set me up." "No, Julian," Clara said. "You set yourself up. I was just the secretary. I was just the hormonal, forgetful, pregnant woman. You never, ever thought I'd be a threat. You never thought I mattered. You were so blinded by your own arrogance and your affair that you committed mail fraud and conspiracy right in front of a security camera." "But why?" David Morrison asked, his face ashen. Why would you, Julian? Sabotage a $2 billion deal, just to fire a secretary? That," Harrison Hayes said, "is the billion-dollar question. Clara." Clara looked back at Julian. The look of a cold, satisfied predator was gone from his face. Now it was just the pathetic, sweaty fear of a man trapped. "He didn't fire me because he thought I was incompetent," Clara said to the board. "He fired me because he was terrified I was competent." She clicked to the next slide. It was a complex flowchart of bank accounts. Julian Vance and Seraphina Croft were not just having an affair, Clara announced. They were embezzling. For the last 3 months, Mr. Vance has been approving ghost invoices from a shell marketing company. That company, Croft Media Solutions, was founded by and is solely owned by Ms. Croft. In 90 days, they have siphoned $4.2 million from this firm. She pointed to a line item. This $4.2 million was then wired to a holding company in the Cayman Islands, a holding company named J. Vance Capital. "Ring any bells, Julian?" Julian Vance made a sound, a low, strangled noise. "I processed those invoices," Clara said. "I saw the signatures. You got sloppy, Julian. You thought I was too stupid or too distracted by my condition to notice that you were approving multi-million-dollar invoices on a Friday afternoon without a single line of due diligence. You fired me to stop me from talking. You fabricated the North Star crisis to make my firing so spectacular, so public, that no one would ever believe a word I said. I would just be the crazy, pregnant secretary who cost us all." She stood up, slowly, and walked around the table until she was standing directly behind him. He was frozen, staring at the screen that showed his financial ruin. "You didn't fire me for your mistress, Julian," she whispered, so only he and the man next to him could hear. "You fired me for your greed. You just used my pregnancy as your excuse. You gestured to my child, my son, and called him a liability. You called me this." She moved back to her seat. "Mr. Vance, you are a thief. You are a conspirator. And worst of all, you are a fool." The heavy oak doors of the founder's boardroom shut with a final, damning click. The silence that fell was heavier than the wood. Harrison Hayes's words, "report," still hung in the air, a guillotine that had just dropped. Julian Vance, a man who had lived his entire life on a diet of adrenaline and other people's fear, was now a statue of pure, waxy terror. The two detectives, businesslike and unimpressed by the bespoke suit and the 52nd floor view, moved to his chair. "Mr. Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and embezzlement," the taller detective said, his voice a monotone that cut through Julian's paralysis. "Please stand and place your hands behind your back." Julian finally broke. It wasn't a snap. It was a crumble. "No," he whimpered, a sound so pathetic it made the board members physically recoil. "No, wait, you don't understand. It was her. It was Seraphina. She seduced me. She set this all up. She planted the files. It was her idea." Clara, who had remained standing, let out a sound of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Pathetic," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "Even now, even with the cuffs literally on their way to your wrists, you cannot take responsibility for a single one of your actions. You blame the woman you were sleeping with. You blame the woman you fired. You are a black hole of a man, Julian. Nothing is ever your fault." As the cold steel clicked shut around his wrists, Julian's terror-fueled denial finally cracked, revealing the raw, venomous hatred beneath. He surged to his feet, a snarling, cornered animal. "You!" he spat at Clara, his face purple. "A secretary. You set me up. This was all you." "I did my job, Julian," Clara said, her voice impossibly calm. "The one I was hired for, the one you paid me for. You just never bothered to ask what it was. You thought I was there to fetch your coffee. I was there to protect my family's name." Marcus Thorne, a senior partner and Julian's primary ally on the board, finally found his voice. "Harrison, this is madness," he sputtered, standing up. "Arresting a senior VP in the boardroom? The PR fallout. This is precipitous. We need to handle this internally." Harrison Hayes didn't even turn his head. "Sit down, Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're embarrassed because you backed the wrong horse. You're part of the internal problem I'm handling." He nodded to the detectives. "Get him out of my sight." The detectives began to pull Julian toward the door. As he passed Clara, he lunged, his cuffed hands straining. "You'll run this company into the ground, you sentimental bitch. This place needs sharks, and you're just weak." Clara didn't flinch. She stood her ground, forcing the detectives to yank him back. She looked him dead in the eye, her gaze a surgeon's scalpel. "My sentiment, Julian, is the one variable your arrogant mind never accounted for. My sentiment is for the 4,000 employees whose futures you gambled with. My sentiment is for the name my father built. You only accounted for your wallet. Enjoy your new accommodations. I hear the views are terrible." His shriek of rage was cut off as the doors closed behind him. The room exhaled. Harrison Hayes let the silence stretch for a beat before he spoke. "As for Ms. Croft," he said, "she is in a conference room on the 40th floor with our audit team and her own lawyer. Faced with the video evidence, she has already provided a full confession, attempting, like Mr. Vance, to pin the entire scheme on him. It won't work. She will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." He then turned his gaze, which had lost none of its icy fire, on the remaining men. "And now, to the board." His eyes landed on David Morrison. The CEO looked 60 seconds from a heart attack. "David," Harrison said, and the use of his first name was a judgment in itself. "You are a good man. You are a kind man. You are not a leader. You let this infection fester in my company because you were too afraid to ask hard questions. You valued stability over integrity, and in doing so, you nearly cost us both." Morrison stood, his hands shaking. "Harrison, I am so sorry. Clara, Ms. Hayes Donovan, I had no idea. I am terribly, terribly sorry for what he did to you." Clara cut him off, not with malice, but with precision. "David, your job wasn't to have an idea. It was to know. You were the custodian of this firm, and you let the wolves into the nursery. Your apology is noted. Your resignation is accepted. You will leave with your full pension, but you will sign an NDA that ensures you never speak the name Vanguard again." Morrison nodded, utterly broken, and walked out of the room. "Marcus," Harrison said, turning to the last dissenter, "you backed him. You championed his shark mentality. You're out. Clean your desk." "You can't do this," Marcus blustered. "I can," Harrison said. "This entire board is dissolved, effective immediately. It will be reconstituted under the new COO's direction by the end of the day. You can leave on your own, or you can follow Mr. Vance in cuffs for aiding and abetting. Your choice." Marcus Thorne, his face pale, fled the room. Finally they were alone. Just Harrison and Clara in the vast, silent boardroom. The morning sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Harrison let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 5 years. "Well, Madam Coe," he said, a weary pride in his voice, "your first day has been eventful." Clara walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city 52 floors below. The same view Julian had prized. "He wasn't the only rot, Dad," she said quietly. "He was just the loudest. The culture here, it's broken. It's what you always taught me not to be." Harrison came to stand beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said, his voice thick with a rare emotion. "I let it get away from me. I was so busy building the machine, I forgot about the people inside it. I was so afraid of being done, of being irrelevant in retirement. I let profit become a substitute for purpose." He turned to her, his blue eyes searching hers. "That's why you are the new COO, not me. I'm going back into retirement, for real this time. This is your firm now, Clara. Fix it." Clara put her hand over his, her other hand resting on her belly. "I'm scared, Dad. It's so broken. And with the baby." "Your pregnancy isn't a liability, Clara," he said fiercely, echoing her earlier words. "It's a perspective. It's your greatest asset. You're not just building for the next quarter. You're building for the next generation. That's what I lost. That's what you'll bring back. Now, shall we go reintroduce you to your new team?" They walked together to the 50th floor. The atmosphere was a funeral. The entire floor was frozen, watching them. They saw Julian's glass cube, now empty. They saw security guards boxing up Seraphina's things from Clara's old desk. Clara walked to the center of the floor. Everyone stared, whispering. "Mary," Clara called out. Mary at her desk looked up, her eyes wide with terror. She thought she was next. She slowly approached. "Clara, Ms. Hayes. Ms. Hayes, Donovan." Clara smiled, a real, warm smile. "Mary, for 8 months, you were the only person on this floor who showed me genuine kindness. You have more integrity in your fingernail than Mr. Vance had in his entire body. You are my new executive administrator. Your title and your pay will reflect your seniority and your value. We start now." Mary's hands flew to her mouth, and she burst into tears of sheer, unadulterated relief. It was the first crack in the ice. That afternoon, Clara held an all-hands, town hall, in the firm's main atrium. She stood in front of 500 employees, her father standing off to the side, a proud observer. She used no microphone. Her voice, trained in Wharton lecture halls, carried. "My name is Clara Hayes Donovan," she began. "My father, Harrison Hayes, built this firm. For the last 8 months, you knew me as Clara Hayes. On Friday, many of you watched me get fired, humiliated, and escorted from this building. This morning, you watched Mr. Vance get arrested." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. "The era of Vanguard as a shark tank is over," she declared. "Sharks are lazy, solitary predators. They eat their own. From today, we will be a wolf pack. We are intelligent, we are strategic, we are collaborative, and we protect our own. This will be a place of integrity first. Profit second, because integrity, in the long run, is profit." She laid out her new vision. "The rot stops today. I am firing every manager in this firm with a credible HR complaint of bullying or harassment. Their positions will be filled from within. And my first act as COO," she paused, her hand going to her stomach, "is to announce the new Vanguard parental leave policy. 6 months, fully paid, for all employees, mothers, fathers, and adoptive parents, because family is not a liability. It is our foundation." A stunned silence. Then, led by Mary, a slow, building wave of applause that became a roar. The next 6 months were a war. The sharks she fired didn't go quietly. Marcus Thorne's allies tried to sue for wrongful termination. Clara countered, in person, with the meticulous evidence of their complicity and incompetence she had gathered as a secretary. Forbes magazine ran a scathing article titled, "The Heiress's Hobby: Can a Pregnant Idealist Run a Wall Street Firm?" Clara's response was to write a fiery op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, titled, "Yes, She Can, and She's Doing It." It went viral. She was vilified on financial TV as sentimental and naive, then praised by a new generation as a visionary. The firm's best and brightest, who had been suffocating under the old guard, flocked to her. Profits dipped for 1 quarter, then soared, driven by a new, massive, green energy fund she had personally championed. The legal reckoning was absolute. Serafina Croft, faced with the video and her own paper trail, folded completely. She testified against Julian, detailing his greed and his paranoia. She received 2 years in a low-security federal prison. Julian, blinded by his own narcissism, made the fatal mistake of refusing a plea deal. He was convinced he could charm a jury. The trial was a circus. He painted himself as a visionary, betrayed by a spurned lover and a conniving secretary. But the prosecution had Clara's meticulous notes, the high-definition security footage, and the bank transfers. The jury convicted him on all counts in under 45 minutes. At his sentencing, the judge, a woman in her 60s, looked down at him with contempt. "Mr. Vance," she said, "you are a man of profound arrogance and a complete lack of character. Your crimes were not of passion, but of a cold, calculated greed. But what the court finds most appalling is your cruel and unusual humiliation of an employee in a vulnerable condition. You used a woman's pregnancy as a weapon. You are, in short, a bully. You are sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary." He screamed, a high, thin sound of disbelief as he was led away. 8 months after the boardroom coup, the 50th floor was unrecognizable. It was bright. The glass cube of Julian's office had been dismantled, replaced by a large, open-plan collaborative workspace. People were talking, laughing, arguing over whiteboards. Clara sat in her new office, a warmer space with comfortable chairs, on the same floor as her team. She was on a conference call, finalizing the acquisition of a tech startup. Her desk was covered in reports, but also a small, silver-framed sonogram. She was in mid-sentence when she stopped, her breath catching. She smiled, a small, tired but triumphant smile. Mary, now her unflappable chief of staff, noticed immediately. "Ms. Hayes." It is," Clara breathed, closing her laptop. "Call my husband, and tell the Tokyo board. The call will have to be rescheduled for tomorrow morning. My son has decided on an earlier-than-expected arrival." Harrison Hayes met her at the elevator, holding a brand-new baby carrier, beaming. "Ready, Madam Co?" "More than ready, Dad," she said, squeezing his arm. As the elevator doors closed, the floor didn't panic. They didn't whisper. They stood, and they applauded their leader. Clara Hayes Donovan had built a company that could run without her for a few hours, or a few months. The new foundation was strong. It wasn't built on fear. It was built on trust. What a story of karma and consequences. It just goes to show that you never, ever know who you're talking to. Julian's arrogance and cruelty weren't just his moral failing, they were his financial ruin. He saw a pregnant secretary as a weak, disposable problem, but he was actually abusing the most powerful person in the building. Clara proved that true strength isn't about yelling, bullying, or wearing an expensive suit. It's about intelligence, patience, and knowing exactly when to make your move. She didn't just get revenge. She rebuilt an entire company in her own, stronger image. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Was it satisfying? Let me know in the comments what your favorite part of the story was. If you loved this story, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another real-life drama. We have new stories coming every week. Thanks for listening.